It's Dr. Amanda with Straightsmile Solutions, straightsmilesolutions.com, and I just heard a great podcast. I don't know if any of you guys listen to the Protrusive Dental podcast. It's one of my favorites. Jazz Gulati, he's a good friend of mine. He's in the UK, and he has a great podcast, and he just did one where he interviewed somebody who had been sued and how they went through it. And granted, that was in the UK, which is a little bit different than the US, but at the very least, I thought, you know what? I had a similar experience. It's been over 10 years, so statute of limitations, I feel pretty comfortable talking about it now. It was highly traumatic at the time, even though I really had nothing to be upset about now that I think about it. And I want to tell you guys kind of what happened and how I got through it, and maybe perhaps why I am, for those of you who have worked with me one-on-one, why sometimes I hammer at home that if you're not going to do perfect, you need to make sure you outline all the other options that the patient was given in writing and explain the risks, benefits, and alternatives of all those sub options. And it's a tedious process. First of all, you need to understand it. And only an orthodontist is going to really understand this. Those of you who are general dentists, pediatric dentists, even now there's a lot of periodontists and prosthodontists doing ortho, you don't understand it. And which is why those of you who are just winging it and taking these engine courses, these Gallers, these Moluses, these, different little aligner courses here and there and thinking you are protected, you are 100% not protected. As a matter of fact, I would call your liability insurance before you even get started with ortho, just to see what additional documents they might have for you. Now, when you work with me, I'm not an attorney. I'm not doing that. I'm just there for clinical questions. So I can explain to you what the options are and maybe guide you to what might be the better options, what might be the risk, benefits, and alternatives of each option. But it's your job to present that to the patient, your job to document that you presented to the patient. That's not my job, okay? So let me tell you about my particular situation, and I'm going to try to explain it as well as I could, given that it was, the actual event, the litigation and the issue with the dental board was about 10 years ago. The actual patient was seen, goodness, had to be close to 12 or 13 years ago, long time ago. So I was working at a DSO as an orthodontist in a DSO in California. I'm not going to mention the office, not going to mention the city. I'm not going to mention the DSO because I don't even want to go there. And yeah, this DSO, they had general dentists, they had pediatric dentists, they had oral surgeons on staff. I don't think they had any other specialists that I know of. An orthodontist, so an ortho would come into the office maybe, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, split the office, share the chairs, whatever. Okay. So regular funnel of patients to screen for ortho. At that time in that office, granted I probably saw this patient, I'm trying to think. At that office that I was working at, I started working there before I had my second kid. So it had to have been 2007, 2008, 2009. And I still worked there. I worked there for about 5 years. So I saw that patient sometime between 2007 and maybe 2011. A long time ago. So kind of a baby in my career. So I was a 1099, which now that I think about it, had I done things differently, I would have 100% required a W-2. Back then, it was a little more normal for orthodontists to sign 1099 agreements. Remember with that, maybe you get paid a little bit more, but you also pay all your own insurance and you handle all your own issues that come up, right? We had a really bad situation that happened and some really shady stuff happened. I loved that job. Loved it. Pay was really good. I did drive to quite a few offices that were maybe an hour, 30 minutes to 2 hours from my house, So I didn't work a ton of days, maybe 3 days a week, but they were long days. But I loved the patients. I loved the office. I loved the support. Pay was good. They were very supportive. It was like a dream job. I could work 3 to 4 days a week, take home full-time money. Of course, paid my own taxes. I felt like they supported me really well. Really happy with the team, the staff, the office managers, the treatment coordinators. Yeah, I really had zero complaints. I honestly thought I was going to work at that DSO for my rest of my life. I was not upset at all. And then something weird happened along the way where they started pushing out and I produced like big money for them, and good work, really, really good work, combination of good quality work and good money. Not only for me, but for them. They made tons of money off me. 4, 5, 6 starts a day was not abnormal. So I know I had $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 days. Easily. And I got what? initially it was a base plus bonus production. Then they switched me to a percentage collections. It wasn't super high. It was maybe like 20, 23, 24%. I can't remember. But I know I didn't pay lab fees, which was good. Somewhere in there when they switched me out, that didn't upset me at all. Like I was like, cool, no, I know I can produce. And I think it was a way that they wanted to push me out. They wanted to bring in cheaper, cheaper orthodontists, lower overhead orthodontists, and maybe did less appliances, things like that. I don't know. I was going to do it the way I was going to do it because I did really good dentistry. I knew that much. Anyways, I'm trying to set the baseline so you guys understand kind of the dynamics of it. Eventually, they started doing crazy shady stuff. What ultimately ended up happening is I was in the front doing some paperwork. And then there was one of the offices, there was a mom who was beating on her kid. There was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7-year-old on it. She was whipping this kid basically in the office. And I was like, whoa, like, are you guys going to stop this? This is, first of all, I'm a mandated reporter with Child Protective Services, obviously as a healthcare provider. That's what I agreed to do. That is my license. I have to report this, what's going on. It was bad, like scary bad. Like I would have called the cops bad, They were like, nope, this is our culture. We're not calling the cops, just let it happen. This is, we don't get involved, and I disagreed with the office manager. So I did report it to CPS because that is my job. And after that, there was major blowback, like major blowback. I don't know what ultimately ended up happening, but I know I did the right thing. That was legally my job. And had I been a W-2, they couldn't have fired me for that, And they didn't directly fire me for that. They just started squeezing me out. Like they would do shady stuff. And I'm still going to get to this case, but I really want to explain to you, what happened so that you can know. Sometimes when you're a 1099 or even part-time, don't have your own practice, weird things can happen. And even if you're doing great dentistry and you think you're really well loved and you think that you're making the money and it's a win-win for everybody, I don't know. Sometimes people there's stupid people out there that don't know how to run businesses appropriately. And they're looking to make the most money, even if they have a substandard provider. But anyways, ultimately they started squeezing my schedule. They started doing shady things like only giving me 1 chair instead of 4, 5, or 6, only giving me 1 assistant. And since I was on production, I'd only make like $50 a day, which was like, this is not worth it. I'm not coming in for this type of schedule. And they were like, too bad. And I guess in my contract, I basically had in fine print that I'd be fine with any size, anything, and these are things you never even thought because it never even came up, right? So just keep that in mind. Okay, anyways, now you guys know, like, I ended up leaving that office, going to some other offices. So this was, old DSO that I no longer work for when this complaint came up. A few years later, and I think honestly, if this complaint had come up when I worked there, I think they would have super backed me up. I mean, they handled everything always, and I knew I didn't do anything wrong. I also knew I did an excellent job at documentation, initial records, and progress panels on every case. And I remember I did have it on this one after, before 12 months or as needed to check roots. I had impeccable treatment plans where I would go over, especially if it was not, there are many options. I'd go over all the options, write them down, have the patient actually sign that they were explained, date, and that all other options were given. So I had a signed treatment plan. I had progress records. I had initial records. I had great notes from every visit. It was pretty much an airtight. So this case was, at this time, this DSO didn't know Invisalign, and Invisalign was pretty subpar back then anyways. Now that I think about this case, I probably would have done it with Invisalign, and I did have Cephs on every case. So, it was a perfect case. It was impeccable. They had nothing. So evidently this patient was amazing. Like every time she'd come in, she'd be super happy, super friendly, talking to me. We were cool. She always had a lot of questions and concerns, and we'd sit down and take our time and, go over it. So in any case, what ultimately ended up happening is that I left the office. And a couple years later, this landed on my plate where I got a letter from the California Dental Board saying that there's been a complaint. It's now going to the peer review committee. You'll have an opportunity to get a copy of your records and defend your case, right? And then a board of your peers will review it and let you know, it's basically like arbitration. We'll let you know the outcome, and then as needed, you can get your liability insurance involved. So, I mean, whenever there's a complaint, there's different ways, right? There is ultimately, there's ways where it comes from the dental board, and that's fairly common. And the patient's hoping to get something out of this or hoping to get you in trouble. Or it can come directly from an attorney. If it comes directly from an attorney, I definitely would be a little more worried, but then usually your liability insurance will pick it up and handle it. But usually most attorneys aren't going to take a dental related case pro bono. Most patients are not going to pay it. These are the type of patients that are looking for money. They're looking for payoffs. So they're not going to take it pro bono unless they do their due diligence and they see that you did something wrong. So I'd certainly be a lot more worried if it came from an attorney than it came from the dental board. Anyone can submit a complaint to the dental board and it's going to get reviewed, right? So I did end up luckily getting a copy of all my records. I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I was like, this was airtight. I did nothing wrong here. And I dotted my I's, I crossed my T's. I had my progress records, initial records. I had all my signatures done, informed consents were done, unsigned ahead of time. So I felt pretty good, but it was just like a ridiculous amount of work, writing up what I did, explaining, going back and forth. It was so stressful, right? Because I was like, am I going to have to pay this patient 20, 30, 40, 50 grand? I don't have this money, and I didn't really want to go through my liability insurance if I didn't have to, ultimately, just because it can raise your rates and your premiums. And I don't know exactly how that works, but I wanted to handle it on my own. So I think that was probably pretty dumb, but anyways, so turned out I won. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress. I was quite offended just because I know I had done such a great job. And let me tell you clinically about this case. If I remember it correctly, she was an adult with overjet and asymmetry. One side was solid class 1, the other side was solid, rock solid class 2, overjet midlines off. So clearly probably but she wasn't skeletally class 2. So front teeth were flared in the ceph. So it was a pretty slam dunk. Nowadays, I probably would have said, hey, let's take out third molars, let's do Invisalign, let's do some sequential distalization. That's probably and a class 2 elastic on the left. Oh, she also had bilateral crossbite, which is tricky to fix. So I believe, I remember the treatment plan, we did a quad helix, which is an adult kind of an expander, which is just tipping to help fix the crossbite. Worked well. She hated it, but I think ultimately we didn't fully fix the posterior crossbite. She chose to have it removed, and she signed a document saying, I realize that this is compromised. I realize that it's not perfect. I'm asking to get this off. I remember I had that document in there. We did take out an upper left premolar. But we had plenty other options that were in there, like leave the overjet, just try improvement with elastics. We had jaw surgery in there, but she really didn't need it. But for the narrow upper jaw, we had a lot of different options. She declined them all. She wanted to take the unilateral extraction case with anchorage and everything. I think we had anchorage. So when I left the office, and I'm sure that was part of the issue, is, obviously I got ousted. I told you that story. She ended up transferring to another provider. She didn't stick around in the office. And the other provider, which I hate this, I really, really hate this when another orthodontist throws another orthodontist under the bus. I always recommend, if you see something weird coming into your office, as a transfer, first of all, you don't know the whole story. You don't give any negative, positive comments, anything like that. You request a full copy of the records, full x-rays, everything, documentation, treatment plan, progress notes, everything. And you go over it yourself. And then if there's still something clearly shady going on, I would call your own liability insurance, because you don't want to get toggled into it. What happened was this doctor directly threw me under the bus. He told the patient, hey, let's try to get some money for you so that you can get veneers. I think that was the ultimate goal. She wanted like 8 units of veneers and she wanted me to pay for it. I think that's what it was. She claimed that her midline was still off. Well, I don't know, because I only saw her for half a year. She went to another provider. Not sure what happened with her midline. It was still looking great when I saw her, and I had progress records to back it up. So not sure who else got involved and screwed it up, but someone else clearly did. Wasn't me. Okay. So ultimately, it was settled in my favor. I didn't have to pay anything. It just was a huge pain in the butt and a lot of time and a lot of stress, and just personally being, I guess, really offended, because I had really thought I did great work and I had taken great care of that patient, and I didn't choose to leave. And I think what was also really frustrating is that the office, when they ousted me out and they fired me, they tried to find some various reasons, even though everything was fine. But I think it was only came down to that CPS issue where I made the complaint about the parent that was beating their child in the waiting room. That was it was a cascade of events that started after that. They would tell the patients all kind of shady things as to why I left. They'd say, she left because she's a bad dentist, she left because she doesn't want to see you anymore. Just mean things, instead of being honest, like, hey, we replaced her, she didn't choose to leave, you know? I didn't want to leave. I was bummed out. I really, really love those offices. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my patients, you know? And these are people that I established relationships with for 5 years. And I was seeing the siblings and the parents. And, you know, normally when you leave, you get a chance to say, hey, you know, oh, I'm going to be leaving, you know, maybe I'm moving or something like that. But, you know, when it just ends and you just rip that Band-Aid off like that, you know, it's tragic, you know, for the patients as well as the doctor, and you need to end it. But anyways, I mean, personally, I think it's better if DSOs want to get rid of somebody, at the very least, they could do some type of severance agreement, you know, so that you leave on a positive note, they leave on a positive note, and you settle things. But anyways, regardless, I want it, not a problem. It's just stressful. Now that I think about it, it shouldn't have been as stressful as it was. It was just the first time it happened. Um, who knows? These things can happen again. I mean, obviously there's statute of limitations, but it comes down to you guys. It's your job to make sure you have an informed consent on every case. It's not your front office's job. It's your job. You're the dentist. I never ever put one bracket on any patient, and any assistant that's of mine that's listening to this has worked with me. You know, I refuse to put a bracket on a patient until I checked all the paperwork. Was it all signed properly? You know, is the patient 18 signing their own? Is the patient under 18? Do we have a co-signer? Is the informed consent signed? Is the treatment plan signed? Is everything explained? Do they have any questions? Are all the risk, benefits, and alternatives explained? Do we have a signature on that, et cetera, et cetera? Do we need any supplemental informed consent forms? I created my whole batch of supplemental informed consent forms for pretty much every possible thing, from impacted canines to other stuff. And a lot of that you'll see in my document store. It is free for anyone that decides to become a concierge or VIP member. We give you access to our whole document store. Everything's for free. So anyways, just letting y'all know, be really careful if you're doing ortho as a non-orthodontist. Make sure you're doing everything right. And you know, those type of, if you can get into any of those lectures, they're really the best lectures. And I feel like there's just none of that going on for all these GPs that are doing ortho. I think a lot of these cases are going to blow up in your face. And I definitely get consulted on a lot of cases, you know, just as an expert in that opinion. You know, how would I do things, you know, either by insurance companies, attorneys, other dentists. And y'all are doing some crazy stuff out there, and you're not dotting your I's and you're not crossing your T's. And this is going to come back and blow up in your face. So definitely get it done. All right. Thanks so much.